Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural episode of the PanFuture Society podcast. This podcast is going to be all about futurism, technology, things that are happening right now, and some things that might happen very, very far in the future. I'm going to start off right away this week with a regular segment. I suppose it'll be regular if I continue doing it from here on out. Anyway, this is News of the Moment, something that's just maybe in the last few days popped up on my news feeds or I've heard about from other sources. This week's News of the Moment is a 3D printed building in Dubai. Yes, 3D printed building. The whole thing is about 2,700 square feet. It's an office building, and eventually they're going to convert it, apparently, into the Museum of the Future, which is right up my alley, I guess. This building was printed primarily using cement, and the 3D printer that was used was 20 feet by 120 feet by 40 feet. That is a rather large machine, but it just kind of blows my mind to think that you could print an entire building like this. From what I read in the news sources, it took one person to monitor and maintain and run the printer itself, and there were 17 or 18 other people involved in the finishing of things like electrical. That's a pretty small crew, I think. And this thing was built in 17 days, cost $140,000. Whatever that means, I don't know much about architecture, but apparently this saves in the neighborhood of 50% on the cost of the building. I think that's anybody who has to pay for a building obviously wants to save money. Interesting to me. I wonder how many people it would have taken to build this thing without the printer, and how many days, how long would it have taken? 17 days for a 2,700 square foot building. That's substantially larger than my house, and I cannot imagine my house being built in 17 days, at least without a massive crew working at least 2 shifts a day on the thing. So this is the kind of thing we're talking about. We want to look far down the road here at the PanFuture podcast, but right now, this happened. This actually happened. I'll post a link in the show notes on the website so you can see the news story, and you can see some photos of this thing. It's a very interesting kind of futuristic rounded cube-looking building. It actually looks really cool, too. If you're just into sci-fi buildings, this would be something you would have seen in a movie, but here it is for real. You could go check it out if you ever get a chance to go to Dubai. So there you have it, your news of the moment. Hello again. My name is Sean, and I'm the host of your show, and at the moment, I am the sole occupant, resident, whatever you want to say, of the PanFuture Society. It's a brand new thing for me to do a podcast, and I'll tell you a little bit about why I'm doing this and where we might be going. I've been interested in future studies and long-term thinking for a few years now, and there's some good web sources, websites, books, stuff like that out there, but I didn't see anything in the way of podcasts, at least not ones that were dedicated 100% to this idea of futurism and long-term thinking. I am not a scientist by training, so I'm going to do my best to bring things into an understandable focus for everyone. This isn't going to be something that you have to be super technically aware to understand, but if you are, I hope you enjoy the show as well. And if I really screw something up in your field of expertise, feel free to drop me a line and let me know what I did wrong. For now, I'm going to be aiming for 15 to 30 minutes of show time, hopefully every week. That is what I'm going to go for. So what is this whole thing all about? Well, for my purposes, we're going to be talking about and being supportive of long-term thinking, good science, equality, progress for all, ethical behavior, and civilization. Um, as far as crossing boundaries into politics, I'm going to avoid getting too political or advocating for a certain candidate or position unless it really comes into the realm of good science or long term thinking. I have my own personal political views, as I'm sure most of you do, but I'm going to keep most of that out here unless somebody really sticks their foot in it or there's an opportunity to push a candidate who really does understand this long term thinking idea. A little bit more about me. As I said, my name is Sean, and I am a musician by trade and training, and also visual artist on the side. Along with that, I've always had a strong interest in science. When I was a kid, I really wanted to be a marine biologist. I wanted to be Jacques Cousteau. But then I found out I get seasick really easy, and that kind of went out the window about the same time I picked up a guitar. In addition to that, I'm also a sci-fi geek, and I think if you're a Star Trek fan, you're already well versed in many of the ideas that I want to cover in this podcast. Gene Roddenberry's vision of the future is a laudable goal to strive for, and I think it kind of gives us a framework of what is possible. I love other science fiction and fiction in general, and I think the very idea that we can imagine things as they could be is very important to this idea of long-term thinking. I also grew up in Wisconsin. I lived in Colorado for 5 years, and now I live in Oregon. As an American, I can't avoid discussion topics from that perspective. If you are a listener from outside the U.S., please forgive any bias I might have. I'm going to try to avoid that, but if I do, and you want to write in, please do. Please let me know how this stuff goes over in Sweden or Japan or Poland or Nigeria or wherever you happen to be. I'd love to hear from you. So some other drivers for me to get into doing this podcast. In the last few years, 5 years maybe, I think there's been a really interesting growth of technology that a lot of people aren't really talking about. We kind of hear the surface stories and you get that wow moment of that's cool, but we're really not discussing what it means for us as individuals and a society. You look at something like 3D printing, and hey, that's cool. I can 3D print a little figure for my tabletop game at home. Well, it goes way beyond that. People are 3D printing organs for use in medical situation. They're 3D printing entire buildings. And not only is that technology really cool, but I think there's an implication of what do we do when people don't need to do as much work as they do now. That's another aspect of futurism that I really want to talk about frequently. At some point, we're going to have robots that do a lot of things, and people aren't going to have to do those things. This is one of those areas where politics could come into it too. Right? Politicians talk about creating jobs. Well, what if you don't have to? Because there are robots that do everything. What are the people going to do? What kind of world are we going to have when not only are there no jobs, but people don't have to do those jobs? It's not like they've been lost or shipped to another country or anything like that. People don't have to do that work. It's a new industrial revolution of a sort, where the original industrial revolution brought us machines that allowed people more free time. It took less people, less time to do a certain amount of work. Now we're looking to a place where maybe every taxi in New York will be a self-driving car. That might sound like a whimsical fantasy or something that will never happen, but the fact is there are self-driving cars right now. This is not something that's always perpetually 20 years down the road. Where's my jetpack? It's not that kind of thing. These things are actually happening right now. And pretty soon, they're going to have a pretty profound impact on our lives. So we're going to talk a lot about that kind of a thing. If you're interested, there's a book called Rise of the Machines, and that is one of the places that I really got my first taste of what automation, 3D printing, robotics, artificial intelligence might have for us. So take a look at that book if you're interested. That was a big kick in the pants for me on this topic. Another influence on me, very big influence on me, was when I heard about the clock of the long now. Probably maybe 4 or 5 years ago even that I heard about this. There's an organization called the Long Now Foundation, and one of their main things is they are building a clock that will run for 10,000 years. We'll get into, I have a show planned specifically about the clock and nothing else, but let that sink in for a moment. 10,000 years from now, this clock that they're building will still be running. Will we even be able to read the clock? Will there be any people around to look at the thing? What will we do between now and then, and how different might the world be? So that's, I guess, leads us into a good time to just kind of define this idea of long-term thinking. I'm not talking about next year. I'm not talking about the next election cycle. We're looking 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years down the road. That's a span of time that most people your brain just can't handle that. We haven't evolved to really grasp that length of time, but I think it's important that we do, because what we do today will have an effect on things very far in the future. Can we even think 1,000,000 years into the future? Some science fiction writers have taken on that time span, but most people never even come close to really thinking about that far into the future. I would like to think that humans will still be around in some form. I'd like to think that we will have solved our major problems, that we have spread to the stars. We live on other planets. We can live in space. There are lots of challenges in the way of that idea, but I don't think any of them are insurmountable. Whether you're thinking about your job being done by a robot in the near future, or whether you're thinking, will we figure out some place to live when the sun goes supernova and makes the earth uninhabitable. On both of those ends of this future spectrum, I like to be hopeful. Usually in my life, I'm a sort of a realist or pessimistic optimist. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. But in a lot of ways, thinking about farther into the future than next week, I am even more hopeful the farther out it goes. I think we really are kind of at a place where we can just kind of see over the top of the next hill and can imagine a wonderful world there where we are free to pursue our passions. We don't have to work to make money. We don't have to worry about trashing our environment. I think there are a lot of technological things that are going to help us. I don't think we should be afraid of artificial intelligence or robots doing things for us, but it is going to be a large adjustment in our society. But I think we can move in that direction if we are consistent in thinking about it. It's not something that we only deal with as humans when there's a crisis. We seem to be pretty good at that. If there's a crisis, we get together and we work on it and we come up with a solution. Well, that's something we really have to get beyond. We need to look at possibilities and be prepared for those possibilities, decide as a society which ones we want the most and work slowly and consistently in that direction. We have a lot of things to deal with in terms of lifespan. Even if we all keep working our jobs, we're going to live longer. What do we do when people live to be 100 years old consistently, or 120, or 150? Or will we get to a point where maybe there's some, a simulacrum of you that gets uploaded to an internet and you get to keep living forever? What does that mean for us as a culture? What does it mean to be alive? So those are some really big questions, and this has been just a really long, rambling opening to what all this means to me. And I hope you'll come along and listen to each show and chip in with your comments and questions, corrections always as I go through all this, and we'll see where this goes. There is an almost limitless number of topics to talk about, and I will get to them. If there's something you really want to hear sooner rather than later, please do suggest that. I've got everything lined up from the clock of the long now to medical advances to even instruments. What's going on, 100 years from now? What is a guitar going to look like? Really interesting stuff on the horizon. So that was, I guess, what futurism is to me, and some final wrap-up notes for this week's show. You can find me online at panfuture.org. That's PANFUTURE.org. Or write me at Sean@panfuture.org. At the moment, there's no Facebook or Twitter that I've set up yet, but hopefully that will be done soon, and those will be linked from the main page, of course. Go to the website, check it out. There'll be blog posts from time to time about some different news items, happenings, links to other places, and of course the show archive will be there, so you can check out the show notes and see more information about what I talked about. Thank you again so much for listening to my rambling. I think part of doing this podcast is also just a way of trying to get all this information in my head to make sense. This is a lot of stuff to take in. Hopefully we can work on that together and come out better for it on the other side. If you've got suggestions for other show topics, for guests to have on the show, if you would like to be on the show and you want to just sit around and ramble on about a topic, I'd be happy to have you. Just drop me a line at the email, sean@panfuture.org. And if you'll allow me one quick moment of begging for money, I do this because I love the topic, but if you'd like to contribute anything, it would help. Again, just shoot me an email and I'll let you know how to do that. And once again, thank you for joining me. I will talk to you again in the future.